But what was the film that got you into deciding that you wanted to make movies, and what was the film that got you out of deciding that you wanted to make movies?
So the second part never happened. I love cinema. I think it's so cool. So I never really got out of it. I just
I'm actually curious. So I pride myself on doing research before we do these kinds of things, and as a result, I've done exactly none for this segment, which is fun. I like to come in fresh. So like, I know wrestling, booze, two things. Obviously, wrestling with whiskey, but what got you from fandom and into wrestling, and then what got you from wrestling into booze? And I know that like, those aren't chapters where like, all right, I closed the chapter on wrestling, now here's a chapter on booze, but like, this is a big story arc. I'm curious where you went from sitting in front of the TV to becoming wrestler to becoming into whiskey.
Well, so I basically what it comes down to, and this kind of expands into like all aspects of my life, and I feel like I can never, with rare exception, there are a few exceptions, I can never be quote unquote like just a fan of anything I've found.
Okay.
If I'm get really into something, it's like, well, I got to do it as like a career, hobby. Like I got to go in on it. I can't just sit back and like be a fan of something.
Okay.
You know what I mean? And for me, even before wrestling it started with, I got so into like cinema. I got so into movies in like the early part of high school. I would say like originally like it was music. Like I played in a band in middle school and high school, and I thought I was going to be a rock star. But then I'm like, I don't know if I'd want to do this for the rest of my life. But it was fun to do. But then I got so into movies and cinema, and I was watching anything from like 70s Scorsese stuff to like French New Wave to like Japanese cinema. And I just got really into it. And I was originally going to go to college for screenwriting because I'm like, I was shy. I didn't think of myself as an in front of the camera guy. I'm like, I'll be the behind. I'll just come up with the ideas. I felt like I was a creative kid. And that's what I was originally going to go for. So like, again, same thing. I loved movies so much. I had to make them. I couldn't just sit back and watch them and be an accountant. No, I had to go make movies. But towards the end of high school, I found out I had much more fun and a little bit more of, I was a little bit more adept at performing. I actually really enjoyed it. And my friend got me into it. And so when I realized, I'm like, oh, I actually really do enjoy this part of it. I had been a fan of wrestling. I came to it later than a lot of kids because we didn't have cable and everything. But then when I did, it was like, okay, I love this. And I messed around with it like in my backyard. I was, messing around on my trampoline and shit like that. And, I was like, you know what? I feel like I get this industry. Like, again, I like performing, and now I've realized I'm like, okay, I can perform. Like, I can do this. Like, I can get in front of the camera, get in front of an audience. But I'm like, this is the kind of, there's something about wrestling, the physical aspect of it mixed with like the over the top theatrics of it. I'm like, it just seemed to click. And so I kind of kept following that. I went to school, college for acting, because for the sole purpose of that will help me be better for pro wrestling.
Yeah.
Didn't even have an intention of being like a traditional actor at first. And I kept following it, moved to Florida, lived in a stranger's house, trained, did all this stuff. As
one does.
You rent a room off Craigslist in some stranger's home, and live there for 3-4 months. And I did that. So honestly, where whiskey came in with it was I followed that. I pursued that. I was very both hardworking and lucky, as often is the case with so much. It's hard work meets those lucky opportunities. And I get signed by the WWE for their developmental program. So for a while, my life was wrestling 24/7. We trained, we worked out, went home, watched wrestling, all that stuff. And I was into it. Once I got settled into it and I felt comfortable and I was still working hard and doing all that, I'm like, you know what? Like, I want something outside of wrestling. You know what I mean? Like, because I reached that point where like I wasn't the scared, shy kid. I felt like I was getting the wrestling under my belt. The company liked me, all that stuff. And so I'm like, I want a hobby, basically. I want a hobby. And at the time, Mad Men was very popular.
I can see where this is going.
Which I feel
going.
like was probably the case for a lot of people for at least like a year. You know,
Sure.
they got into like old fashions and Manhattans really, really hardcore for like a year. But like,
It's
yeah,
smoking
right?
inside.
But
Right.
it stuck with. So like initially, I remember I was living in Florida in an apartment. I went to the Salvation Army and I found this like wine cabinet, like this thing that had like you could hang wine glasses and put the bottles in the base, very very thin. And I'm like, sure. It was like $50. I'll take that. And I went and I got like vermouth, and I got some whiskey, and I got originally it was like cocktails. Like I'm gonna be Tom Cruise in Mother Frippin' Cocktail, and I'm like got a shaker bottle, and I got like limes to cut up, and I'm like, oh man, this is gonna be so cool. And then I realized remembered I live alone and I don't entertain, and so the vermouth and all the fruit went bad in about about a week. And I'm like, wait, I have to go buy more of this shit. I'm like,
It's just
It's
yeah,
not
I
a
was
one-time
like,
deal.
I'm like, I can't just like put this in a cabinet and it's good until like 6 months down the road when I have like one friend over. So then I was like, all right, cocktails are very cool, but I need something that I can just kind of like a go-to drink. And my dad always drinks scotch, big scotch drinker, drink it neat with one ice cube. And I was always like, how do you do that? And so I just kind of was like, you know what? I'm going to do that. So you know what I did? Like a nerd, I went to Borders. I went to the frickin' bookstore, and I was like, I went to the culinary section and I found the whiskey books. I was like, how do you drink whiskey? And I found Lou Bryson's book on,
oh shit.
I think it's literally called How to Drink Whiskey.
Yeah.
And of course I didn't buy it. Sorry, Lou, I'm an asshole. I skimmed it in the aisle while my wife was shopping for like books and stuff. And he just basically was like, the core of it was you got to drink every day, like a little bit, and just get used to it, handle it. So I sat on my couch with a bottle of Knob Creek Single Barrel and a can of Coke Zero, sip, chase. Until I no longer, until it was a little bit easier, a little less fire, no longer needed the chaser. And then I was like, oh, okay, I can do this. All right, I feel like a mature. I wanted to drink like an adult, right? All right, I can do this. I can do.
Finally
I can do that.
upgraded.
And then it was after that, once I was able to do it, that's when I was like, okay, now that I can handle it, what's good, right? And so what do? You go to the internet. And
Right. Where everybody can tell you that all you have to do is bypass
tell
it.
you how dumb you are for anything you like. That's what the internet is for. Telling you that what you like sucks.
course.
That's what I've discovered. So, no, but that literally, I mean, Reddit and Facebook groups and podcasts like Bourbon Pursuit and, founding Bourboner on Facebook, things like that. The good, the bad, the ugly, all of it. But I just discovered that there was this whole niche, like subculture. And I was like, oh my God, like, I just thought I was going to find like a recommendation on Wild Turkey or something like that. And there's podcasts, there's YouTube channels, there's all this stuff. And I'm like, okay, this is cool. I can nerd out about something as a geek growing up. I'm like, when something is this involved, I'm like, I can get in on that. And so, I mean, without, further ado, I mean, I just went down the rabbit hole. You know what I mean? I went down all kinds of avenues, and it was like, okay, this is a cool little subcategory, and the rest, kind of, as they say, is history. I found so many different connections through that.
Interesting. It's funny. So you mentioned your acting background, and when you said, a mark, all I could think of was hit the mark, which is a big filmmaking and acting term, because that's my background. Actually, I have a degree in film. So, fun to hear of someone else in acting, but I was like, they can't possibly talk about like smacking around the mark, but I think that's interesting. It's fun. It's interesting to hear the trajectory, because John and I both started, I think most people who get into whiskey are kind of like, I'm going to get into whiskey. And then like 6 weeks later, they're like, okay, I can finally drink it neat, like,
yeah.
like, okay, I'm into it. Like I can drink it without Diet Coke. So, I think that's interesting and fun. It's, skipping right over the small batch for the small batch limited edition describes very early, I was like, well, why would we start at the bottom when we can just start at the top?
Yeah.
And you're like, oh, the top's hard to find. Okay, let's go
Yeah.
back to the bottom.
Right. Oh, that's why people start at the bottom. No, okay, now I get it. The math checks.
I'm
out.
curious. So before we get deeper into whiskey, just as a film nerd, and you can skip over this if you need me, but what was the film that got you into deciding that you wanted to make movies, and what was the film that got you out of deciding that you wanted to make movies?
So the second part never happened. I love cinema. I think it's so cool. So I never really got out of it. I just excuse me. Wrong pipe. No, yeah, I know. I never like fell out of it. It was just that like wrestling I loved as a kid, and I never really thought it was a possibility.
Mm-hmm.
And then when I started performing, it was like, oh, maybe it was. So I kind of started focusing on the acting and that the performing part of it. But no, I never fell out of love with cinema and everything. I mean, for me, oh, that's tough. I don't know what there was no specific one that was like a light bulb or like glass breaking moment of like, this is the thing that makes me want to do it. I will say this though. I have such a strong love for old, I guess they're not even old, but like the gangster drama, man, true crime, Scorsese.
Yeah.
That was the stuff that got me into, I guess I'll narrow it down to that. Scorsese, even earlier work, Bang the Drum Slowly, Mean Streets, stuff like that. I really, really, really liked. I liked his style, the grittiness, and it was a lot of his stuff was more than just Tommy guns and cigars, you know what I mean, and fedoras. And that's what I really, there was a grit and grime to him that wasn't just like, why is she? It wasn't Public Enemy, like, it was like, it was a little rough around the edges. It was a New York and scene, especially that he talks about it all the time. He grew up seeing, and it felt much more authentic. And so I love those stories. So if I had to kind of narrow it down, it would be like the true crime epics of Scorsese.
Okay, it's fun. Two movies for me was Reservoir Dogs, obviously because it was Reservoir Dogs, and then the movie Secret Window with Johnny Depp. It was just kind of like, you can tell interesting, engaging, but like, and then Inception came out when I was in high school because I'm a wee baby, and I was like, okay, that's when the technical can like come in. But then I was sitting watching the movie 400 Blows, which is like is heralded of one of the great, and I was like, this fucking sucks, like get me out, and that's when I realized software and stuff. But I'd love to ask that question of people who are film people, because sometimes people are like, yeah, I was into it, and then I realized like I don't have a career here, I'm getting out into something else and all that fun stuff. But yeah, I mean, going from acting to wrestling, like I feel like that is a really unique like character arc, not to like put you in the third person here, but people, I feel like a lot of people are like, I want to be a wrestler, and they're like, oh, so you need to act. So like, why don't you go to acting school? It's very rarely like, I'm in acting school and I would like to become a professional like wrestler, which I think is really cool.
Yeah, no, most people, it's like either, it's funny actually, a lot of wrestlers after they've been in it for a while and they they start to see the I guess, I don't know, the shelf life of throwing yourself onto your back, neck, and head for years on end. Then they go, oh, well, hey, I've been on TV. I'm going to go into acting. And some of them, Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson, a prime example. John Cena is another one. Have been very successful. But yeah, no, for me, it was, I knew, when I was a kid, I knew I wanted to be it. And so like I used acting as a way to help me hone that. And then I fell in love with traditional acting and stuff too. Again, it was all part of that performance, filmmaking. I always loved film, TV, stuff like that. But originally the origin of it all was to kind of give me at least a taste or a leg up or something in the wrestling business. Because at the end of the day, the wrestling business is this incredible physical performance art. But at the end of the day, it's a TV show. You know what I mean? So you gotta be able to be comfortable on camera in front of an audience, speaking, so emoting, all that kind of stuff. So yeah, that was my focus.
I mean, obviously you're a dude who likes to sink his teeth in, whether it's making the move from a passion for film to diving into acting, cinema, and whatnot, evolving into your pretty wild wrestling career. And then now as we kind of look at it, you're really kind of sinking your teeth into whiskey. you've gone into a lot of directions, whether that is, managing your YouTube channel, your social media. You're even doing single barrel selections and stuff now. Do you think that this is another spin of the same coin here? Are we still on the same evolution, or are you like getting ready to sink your teeth in to that next piece of the puzzle?
What's the next piece of the puzzle? What do you mean? Yeah, I
Well,
got
that's what I'm curious about. Like, so you're a dude who's like, you've kind of evolved from this guy who's like, as you said, a geek in school growing up and playing the acting thing. And as that evolved, and then like, as you're a high school dude who's really into cinema and wanting to go to school for that, do you imagine yourself as a guy who's like buying single barrels of whiskey? Do you imagine yourself as a guy who's got like a whiskey present? Like, here you are wrestling with whiskey. You know what I'm saying? Like, where does this go?
That
here?
has been since the minute I started. Like I said, since the minute I typed in wrestling with whiskey on Instagram, and I was like, all right, I'm gonna share some bottles that I get, because then when I was traveling full time and everything, I was like, oh, I also have an opportunity to get some cool stuff, because I remember now that I think about it, I haven't thought about this in years. The reason I started the Wrestling with Whiskey Instagram page was because I had gone on tour in Japan with WWE, and I knew over there, I'm like, oh, I'm able to get export Blantons and export bottles and stuff. So I'm like, I'm going to go over there and get this. So I got a Blanton straight from the barrel. I got like a Wild Turkey 13-year like Distiller's Reserve thing. And I was like, oh, this is so cool. I've heard about this stuff, and now I actually have it. I'm going to show it off. That's kind of what was the impetus for the Instagram page. And honestly, I never had like an end goal. I was never like, I'm going to turn this into some media brand, or I'm going to turn this into I'm going to be an ambassador for somebody, or I'm going to make people. The question I get the most is, are you going to make your own whiskey? Like, are you going to make your own brand? And I'm like, you know what? And whereas most people in my position or anything similar would probably be like, yeah, one day. Honestly, I don't want to. I don't. I will say, like, so while I can't, I've told you before, I can't sit back and just be a fan. In this regard, I feel like I've kind of hit my, I don't want to say limit. Limit is, I hate that word because I don't want to limit anything. But like, I prefer being a hobbyist and or what do you call it, professional appreciator. I don't want to get myself into the business of it, unless it were some like home run. I had some partnering with somebody who had like the greatest vision known to man that I happened to just click with. Unless that happened to fall into my lap, I want to be able to be media. I love talking about it, writing about it, all that stuff. I'll let the experts handle that. My name doesn't have enough clout to stick on a bottle like frickin' Peyton Manning or some shit like that anyway. So it's like, so right. Like I'm not going to try to like sit back on that and be like, yeah, slap my name on a brand like Clooney and it'll sell 1 million, cases. No. I know that it's not the case anyway. So like, I just like breaking it down, nerding out over it, engaging an audience on it. I don't know. Yeah. I don't have the time or patience to start like a brand like that, but just growing this. And also my big thing when I started doing the Instagram and especially the YouTube was just like, I'm taking you on my journey with me, learning. I know way more than when I started, and so I won't deny that. But my humility has always been a cornerstone of everything I've done. It's just like, I don't care. Even if you are the guy who, like I was at the beginning, who's like, all you want to buy is Pappy and Limited. If you're that douchebag, fine. I'll say the word. But like, it's your money. It's your life. You drink what you drink. You like what you like. I'm not going to judge you too hard. Maybe a little bit. But like, yeah, just come on a journey. Let's talk. Let's talk about why we like this stuff. Why we go to such lengths to get it. I don't know. Engaging, building a community. I like getting people excited about the things that excite me. That's one of the things I've found in the last couple of years. That's kind of one of my goals in kind of everything I do. And that now that includes wrestling and broadcasting and all kinds of things. I'm like, I like getting people excited about the things that excite me.
That's poignant. That's a good way to put it. It's also, I think, probably a lot better overall to be wrestling with whiskey instead of stressing over whiskey, which when you start talking about the brand, the ownership, and having to really push this thing as a means of a career, that's a pretty big shift. And I think it would probably be pretty hard to just appreciate and be, I think you said an expert level appreciator or something to that effect. It's hard to do that when you are also ultimately responsible for the company.
Yeah, exactly. Because then everything, it's one of those things where, and people who do it, that's great, but your entire presence then, you know, again, the social media, the marketing, all that stuff would have to be basically aimed towards sell. Like, how do we get brand out there? And then I would feel guilty if I just took a day to talk about, hey, let's talk about New Riff. This is a great pick I found. I'm like, oh, shoot, I should have been pushing the brand. So, yeah, I'd rather be able to, like, let the great people who know what they're doing and have a track record put stuff out. Let me try. I'll talk about it. I'll shit talk it. I'll praise it. I'll do whatever. You know what I mean? Like, I love that aspect of it.
That makes a lot of sense. And I think that parlays into, you know, because people even, they'll ask me, they're like, hey, like, you know, you do all these single barrels. When are you going to start a brand? And I'm like, you know, they're like, everyone's starting a brand. When are you going to get on it? And I'm like, people are starting a brand like Brad Paisley and like The Rock. Like, you know, like that is just a completely different stratosphere of, you know, of person that's coming into the industry for their own personal gain. I'd rather keep it about what's good about the whiskey, but I want to turn this on its head. So if you, no strings attached, if this brand walked up to you and said, we want you to ambassador our whiskey, and it was your total dream brand, it's your favorite brand, it's the brand you've always looked up to, what brand would that be? Just curious.
That's tough.
And Long Branch is taken because
I know,
man.
And if Glendronach walks up to me, I'm sorry, I'm quitting it all. I'm going like all day Glendronach. But I'm really curious, like, you know, like, is there that dream brand for you? You know, where, you know, all lines and hooks and singers off the tape. I'm just curious.
So there's a few options. So like it's funny. So like Long Branch stuff. While like of the major distilleries, again, and bourbon is my cornerstone.
Sure.
Wild Turkey, yeah, Wild Turkey would be that of those prime brands. Like, yeah, man, dude, just because there's something about Wild Turkey, their entire lineup from bottom to top is solid. It's available, it's affordable,
yeah,
and I love that. So then, but then there's also things like, I mean, honestly, like again, like New Riff, I freaking love what they're doing, and I think they have such a good upside. And they're just getting started. And like the single barrels I picked are some of them are lights out for only being about 4 years old. And then there's other brands too that have been fortunate enough just through kind of like happenstance and a couple of mutual kind of connections, like Bardstown Bourbon Company. I've actually made some really close connections there and been able to talk to them like in depth, like outside of social media and like a YouTube video and stuff like that. Like I'm like, just literally been down there and like in a room with them and just like talking. And I love what they do. I love the team there.
Sure.
Top to bottom. It sounds like I'm blowing smoke. I know.
No,
like,
they're good people. I love spending time.
No, they're killing it, man.
Their whole, like their team, again, from top to bottom, their guest experience, the restaurant, their vintage spirits vault, their warehouses, all from that's just the experience of being there, to their collaborations that they with their discovery series and their finishing series stuff, and then even like I've had some of their own distillate, and I'm like, this is gonna be good and I think they're holding out till I think 6 years to release anything fully homegrown.
Yep.
That's I'm like, kudos to you. I'm like, it's gonna be good at 6 years. I'm like, I've had some little samples here at like 3 and 4, and I'm like, it's solid. I'm like 6, 7, 8, it's gonna be real good. So if I'm forced to choose today, I'd probably say something like Bardstown Bourbon Company, just because again, top to bottom, front end to back end, I'm very, very supportive and a fan of everything they're doing.
It's fun. Like sometimes I ask that question, people are like, oh, Stitzelweller, and I'm like, you know they're dead, right? Like they're not making any more.
Yeah, that's not a thing.
So
anymore,
what,
bro.
Bullet?
Yeah.
Didn't they take over the old distillery?
Right.
Yeah, Bullet over in Shively, but yeah. Of your entire career so far, what was the hardest day of your wrestling career? people love to ask, like, what was the best day? When did your dream come true? But like, what was the hardest day of your wrestling career? Sorry, I can't talk.
That's tough. Hardest day. I mean, so like there's I feel like it's where, there's easy answers, like days where it's like just a crazy long schedule, right? So like, I mean, I could give you something fun. Like, I'll give you two answers. The fun answer is the day I ended up in 3 countries within 24 hours.
All right.
We did,
Okay.
so like we do these European tours, right? And so I remember, I think we did a show in, what did we do with it? We were in England, I don't know what day it was. Let's call it Tuesday. In England Tuesday. So we did the show, stayed there overnight. So then I woke up in England, got on a flight, went to Germany. We flew to Germany, did a show there that night. After the show, got back on the plane, flew to Spain. So I woke up in England, performed in Germany, fell asleep in Spain. And so we were up for like 17 hours or something like that. Not like go. So there's stuff like that. I mean, I loved it. It's fun. And then I woke up the next day at like 6 a.m. with 2 of my wrestling buddies, and they made me go to the gym, and I fucking hated them. But it was also awesome. Because it was just like, you just go. We're on the grind, brother. You know what I mean? But like for real, the hardest day like my career was April of 2020. I got released from my WWE contract. Right at the start of the pandemic.
Okay.
And it's a cliche, but it was just like frick. It was really hard because with wrestling, and especially with WWE, it's entertainment. It's fickle. It's people come and people go. So I was prepared from day one to get, hey, you're going to be here for a while, and then at some point you won't be. Right?
Sure.
There's very few people who are like lifers there, kind of thing, and transition into like, oh, you're going to run things backstage. Some people do. It's pretty rare. So I was totally prepared for that. And in any other year, okay, you hit the ground running. There's a vibrant independent scene in the United States. There's multiple other companies. They're smaller, but there's multiple other companies who run TV shows and stuff like that. Between all of it, I would have been fine. But it was like literally March of 2020 when anything that is live event based, to be in a business that's live event based, bad time. And so that was it wasn't getting let go. It wasn't getting released from my contract that upset me. It was getting dropped out of the plane and landing in quicksand. It was like, I can't do it. I can't make people run shows. I can't make people book me on all these events because they're not happening.
Yeah.
So it was just a hard pivot and what am I going to do kind of scenario. And so between some friends getting me some, certain gigs that were still running and my wife picking up the pieces and everything like that, it worked out okay. And I'm doing fine. I'm doing great now, but it was a really scary, like almost a year, but I mean, for sure, like those first 5-6 months of just like nothing. What the hell am I going to do? Is this ever going to get better kind of thing?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because that's my bread and butter, is that whole industry. So, that was a really scary, unnerving part, but stay the course and, you adapt and everything like that. And it's turned out okay now, but yeah, it was a really scary, little bit of time there.
It's a good thing you had a good collection of whiskey to fall back on.
Oh, baby. All the pappies were gone within the first 2 weeks. Oh, baby. Comfort drinks. Comfort drinks.
Put a hurting on it.
All the stag disappeared.
That's right.
Okay. I mean, I feel you.
Yeah, worldwide recycling went through the roof in those months. A lot of
That's why we're in a glass
got
shortage
turned in.
now. It finally has slowed down a little bit.
That's
We were
exactly
recycling everyone's glass for a long
I spent
time.
a lot. So in my hobby, I made some friends who were like Chicago liquor store. And liquor stores were deemed essential.
Yeah.
So I spent a lot of time just like hanging out.
Of course.
I had my mask on.
Yeah.
I was just like, "Yep, I've been
I'll be at Binus.
I've been at home
See you later.
for 3 months. I'm just gonna come and hang out in your store for like 3 hours."
Yep.
Not so bad. I mean,
Yeah, all right.
that's fun.
Awesome. Matt, thanks for coming on.
No,
man. This has
absolutely.
been really fun. I want to give you the stage for a minute here to just kind of pump your YouTube channel, your Patreon, and all that. Just let everybody in the audience know where they could check out more of your content.
No,
and connect
absolutely,
with
and
you.
I appreciate that. Yeah, thanks everybody. I mean, you can find me. Basically, it breaks down to two simple things: Wrestling with Whiskey. Search it on almost every platform. We're on Instagram, Twitter, YouTube. Also, the Straight Shooting podcast, where I send blind whiskey samples to my wrestling friends and make them try them while I interview them, is a fun format. All of that, again, it's under the Wrestling with Whiskey banner, so check that out all over. Outside of that, Drama King Matt is the other basically handle. That's kind of wrestling. I do gaming stuff. I do hosting, acting, all that. That's under Drama King Matt. Again, Twitter, Instagram, YouTube, Twitch, all that stuff. So Drama King Matt, Wrestling with Whiskey. You search that anywhere on the internet, you'll find this ugly mug, and we'll have a good time.
Rock on. Well, it has been
Awesome,
great to
brother.
have you. Thank you again. It's been awesome. We love to talk to people who are in the industry, but it's super fun to get to kind of branch out and hear the other stories that intertwine with the whiskey industry as well. So it's been great to have you, Matt. Thanks so much.
No, thank you guys for having me. It's been a blast.